Something was missing, 1,500 pounds of it. And nobody at that grain elevator wanted a 17-year-old asking where it went. Here's what you need to know before anything else. A machine doesn't lie on purpose. But a machine nobody checks for 5 years might as well be lying every single day. And in the fall of 2019, in a small town in rural Ohio, one teenager was about to prove that a printed number on a scale ticket isn't truth. It's just a claim. And claims could be wrong for years before anyone bothers to check. Cole Bannister was 17. He wasn't looking for a fight. He was just trying to get his family's corn weighed and get home before dark. He'd loaded that trailer himself, watched the cart monitor climb the entire time, written the final number down in pencil the second the auger cut off, the way his grandfather taught him before he passed. Then, just to be sure, he climbed back into the bin and sank a measuring rod straight through what was left. 3 separate checks. 3 separate methods. All of them agreed. 8,400 pounds. Then the scale house printed its ticket. 6,900. 1,500 pounds. Just gone. On paper. The woman behind the counter didn't even look up. She slid it across like she'd done 1,000 times, told him, "That's just how it goes sometimes," and went back to her clipboard. Cole didn't argue. Not yet. He folded the ticket into his shirt pocket, walked out to the truck, and sat there a second longer than he needed to, because something about that number didn't sit right, and Cole Bannister was the kind of kid who couldn't let a number sit wrong. By the time he hit the county road, he was already running it in his head. 1,500 pounds of corn, that's almost 27 bushels. At that fall's prices, somewhere around $130. One load. If this had been happening every delivery, every harvest for years, that wasn't a rounding error anymore. That was a slow, quiet bleed. The kind that could take a family farm down without a single person ever noticing the wound until it was too late. If you've ever handed someone your trust and gotten a printed lie back in return, stay right here, because what this kid uncovered underneath one small-town grain elevator didn't just cost his family 1,500 pounds of corn. It had been quietly draining an entire county, harvest after harvest, for 5 straight years. And if this is your first time here, subscribe now, because every week we go looking for stories exactly like this one. Ordinary people who refuse to let machines' number be the last word. Cole grew up on Bannister Farms. 310 acres his family had worked since the 1950s, out past the county line where the corn ran right up to the tree line. His dad, Grady, ran the place, but Grady had thrown his back out hauling feed back in September, and harvest doesn't wait for anybody's back to heal. So the grain cart, the bin checks, the runs into town, more and more of it landed on Cole. He didn't complain about it at the dinner table. He just did it. And he did one thing that made him different from every other kid hauling grain that fall. He wrote everything down. Every load, date, bin number, cart weight, moisture reading, destination, 3 full seasons of it, filled into a battered spiral notebook that never left the truck dash, because his grandfather kept one just like it, and nobody in that family had ever found a reason to stop. That night at the kitchen table, Cole laid it all out. He checked the cart reading against his bin log from 2 mornings earlier. He pulled the moisture sensor data his dad had installed that spring. 14.6%. Nothing unusual. Nothing that should make 1,500 pounds vanish on an 8-mile drive into town. Every number he had lined up clean. 8,400 pounds. Give or take a rounding margin. The mill's number didn't belong anywhere near that conversation. He called the elevator the next morning. The man who picked up gave his name as Dale Ferris, the yard manager, and he had clearly given this exact explanation before. Smooth, unbothered, almost rehearsed. Cart sensors drift, he said. Commercial scales get certified by the state every single year, no exceptions. Moisture shrink accounts for more than people expect. He wasn't rude about any of it. If anything, he sounded relaxed, the way a man sounds when he said the same reassuring thing to a dozen worried farmers, and every single one of them believed him and hung up. Cole almost did too. He sat with that explanation for nearly an hour, turning it over, because it was almost good enough to believe. Almost. Because Cole already had a rough idea of what a proper moisture shrink deduction should look like on paper. And when he finally sat down and ran the numbers the right way, one figure at a time, using the exact moisture reading he'd taken with his own hands that morning, Dale Ferris's explanation didn't come anywhere close to covering 1,500 pounds. Something else was happening inside that elevator, and Cole Bannister was about to spend the next 2 weeks finding out exactly what it was. Started with cracked, rusted-out sensor he almost blamed for everything, before the real answer turned out to be sitting inside a machine nobody had checked in 5 years. Part 2. Cole didn't sleep much that night. He kept coming back to one thing his grandfather used to say, the same line every time a number didn't match reality. A printed ticket isn't proof. It's just a claim until you check it twice. His grandfather had a notebook of his own once, a worn brown thing he called his line detector. Cole had inherited the notebook. But that night, he understood the phrase for the first time. The next load he took in, he did something different. He didn't just trust the cart. He drove 3 miles out his way to his neighbor's place, a man named Walt Farrow, who kept a certified portable platform scale for weighing livestock, and weighed the empty trailer before he ever touched the bin. He wrote the tare weight down. Then he loaded 7,200 pounds out of bin 2, a completely different bin, a completely different sensor, and confirmed it against a stick measurement he'd taken that same morning. He pulled 3 grain samples and ran them through his own handheld moisture meter. 15.1%. He drove straight there. No stops. No excuses left for anybody to point to. The ticket came back at 5,950 pounds. A 1,250-pound gap. On a load he had personally verified 3 separate ways before it ever left the farm. Cole sat in that parking lot for a full minute, just staring at the number. This wasn't a sensor issue anymore. This wasn't drift. This was something inside that building, and it had been there long enough that Dale Ferris had an answer ready before Cole even finished his question. So Cole started asking around. Quietly at the gas station, at the feed store, at the co-op meeting his dad dragged him to that Thursday. He didn't accuse anybody of anything. He just asked one simple question. Do you keep your own weight records? Do you write your bin numbers down before you deliver? Most people laughed it off. That's what the elevator's for. They said, you don't weigh the guy weighing you. But a woman named Denise Calloway, who ran 200 acres east of town with her husband, went quiet for a second, then pulled a stack of old envelopes out of her glove box. 8 years of delivery records. An old habit, she said, from a father who'd once gotten burned on soybeans decades earlier. Cole took her record home and laid them next to Millridge's tickets from the last 3 seasons. The pattern wasn't loud, but it was there. In 41 documented loads, Denise's farm numbers ran consistently higher than the elevators, not always by much, but always in the same direction. An average shortfall of just over 8%, not random error. A lean. A pattern only points one way when something's doing it on purpose, or something's been broken the same way for a very long time. Then he talked to a farmer named Reese Talbot north of the county line. Skeptical at first, Reese eventually handed over a shoebox of receipts going back 5 years. Same direction, same magnitude. Cole laid all 3 sets of records across the kitchen table and sketched it out in pencil, date on one line, percentage gap on the other. Every single point sat on the same side of 0. This time, when he called Millridge, he didn't call Dale Ferris. He asked for the regional office, and he brought a folder, his 2 verified loads, Walt's platform scale readings, the moisture logs, and the summary from Denise and Reese's records. He sat across from Dale in that small office that smelled like grain dust and diesel, and he asked one calm question. If I get an independent, state-certified technician to inspect your equipment, will you allow it? Dale said he'd have to check with corporate. That answer took 11 days to become a yes. The inspection happened on a cold morning in early November. A technician named Priya Okafor arrived with certified test weights and calibration equipment. The main scale passed clean, within tolerance, exactly as advertised. But then she moved to the automated grain sampler, the machine that pulls a sample from every incoming load, reads its moisture, and feeds that number straight into the shrink calculation. That unit had been installed in 2009. Its last full independent calibration was logged in 2019. 5 years earlier, right around the time Denise Calloway's numbers started drifting. When Priya ran test samples through it against her own certified meter, the gap showed up immediately. Grain sitting at a true 15.1% moisture was being read by the machine as 17.4%. That false reading was quietly triggering a far bigger shrink deduction on every single load that came through, a deduction of over 1,200 pounds on grain that should have only lost about 120. 5 years, every harvest, buried inside a number nobody had ever thought to question, because it came from a machine, and machines are supposed to be right. The elevator wasn't hit with fraud charges. There was no proof anyone had touched that machine on purpose. But negligence carries its own weight. Corrected settlements went out to every farmer who delivered during those 5 years. Cole's 2 loads were reissued first. Denise and Reese followed. Letters went out across the county. Dale Ferris came to the Bannister kitchen table a few weeks later to go over the correction. He was quieter than he'd been on that first phone call, the one where he'd sounded so sure of himself. He looked at Cole's battered spiral notebook sitting on the table between them and asked how he'd known where to look. Cole told him the truth. He hadn't known. He'd just known the number was too big to be an accident, and he kept following it until it stopped being a guess. 8,400 pounds left that farm. 6,900 was never the real number. It was just what a broken machine printed, trusted without question for 5 straight years, on tickets that quietly added up to something far bigger than one teenager's missing load. The lesson was never about one broken sensor. It's about writing down what you measure, checking what you're told, and never letting a machine's confidence stand in for your own 2 eyes. Because on a farm, and honestly, almost everywhere else, the people who pay the closest attention are the hardest ones to quietly take from. If this story made you double-check something you've been trusting without proof, subscribe and share with someone who'd do exactly what Cole did.